My name is Ellis Wren. I'm 34 years old. And last week, I signed the papers that erased my father's name from my life for the second time. The first time, I was 5. It wasn't my choice. He left me there, on Ashwood Bridge. Rain in my hair, silence in my chest. No goodbye, no explanation, no name. 25 years later, they called me to say he was dying, not with grief, with paperwork. Guardianship required? Legal consent. Unclaimed remains. People think closure looks like a courtroom or a hospital bed. But for me, it looked like standing in front of the same bridge where it started, holding nothing but a scarf he left behind and a name I built without him. Because I didn't come back for forgiveness. I came back to finish a story I didn't write, but refused to let end without me. And if you've ever been left behind, not just by a person, but by a family, a system, a legacy, stay. Because sometimes the loudest thing you'll ever say is walking away. Jordan stood at the edge of my office, holding my phone like it was something radioactive. I didn't even look up from the contract I was reviewing. My pen moved deliberately across the last line. The ink dried faster than my sympathy. "It's from Ashwood Care Center," she said, voice tight. I placed the pen down. "Do you have anything else I need to sign?" There was silence, heavy, disbelieving. When I finally looked up, Jordan was still there, stunned. Her brows were furrowed the way they always were when she couldn't decide whether I'd crossed a line or just drawn it sharper. "It's May 13th, she whispered, like it meant something. Like the calendar had a conscience, but all it meant was another year, another reminder. I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window behind my desk. The skyline of Chicago shimmered with its usual indifference. Far in the distance, like a scar across the city's face, the Ashwood Bridge arched over the murky water. It hadn't changed. Steel and silence. Like him. He left me there, rain-soaked, 5 years old, crying so hard I didn't make a sound. A passing trucker saw me hours later and called 911. Thomas Wren never looked back. Never wrote, never called, never explained. And now he was dying. I turned back to Jordan, who hadn't moved. Her fingers still curled tightly around my phone. "Maybe he regrets it," she said quietly. "Maybe he wants to explain." "I'm not 5 anymore," I replied. "And I'm not waiting on that bridge." She stepped closer, lowering the phone. "Ellis, he's dying." I took the phone from her hand and tossed it gently onto the leather chair. "He's been dead for a long time. I just regret that he doesn't know that." The room was too quiet after that. Even the HVAC system seemed to hold its breath. Jordan stood there, unsure. Then she nodded and left. When the door clicked shut behind her, I walked to the old bookshelf tucked into the wall behind the drinks cabinet. It had survived 3 apartments, 4 renovations, and 1 marriage. And I'd kept one thing inside it that mattered: an old rusting mailbox. Just the shell. I found it at a junkyard 10 years ago. The same model as the one that used to sit outside our house before he disappeared. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed, sealed, corners frayed, postmarked 2002, from Rachel. I never opened it. My fingers hesitated over the flap now, brushing against the worn crease. It would be so easy to tear it open, to let it all flood in. Her voice, her questions, her version of him. But I didn't want her truth. I had built a life without it. I walked to the fireplace. The flames had already been lit that morning. Chicago spring could be unpredictable. I tossed the envelope in. It curled quickly, edges blackening. But before the paper collapsed into ash, something small slipped out and fluttered to the floor. A folded piece of paper. Unburnt. I crouched and picked it up. Scrawled in quick, almost frantic handwriting were 7 words. "If you ever want answers, Find me, R. I didn't go to him, but the court brought him to me. The hum of fluorescent lights in courtroom 5A felt more judgmental than the judge herself. I sat in the second row behind the defense table, arms folded, watching my attorney arrange a neat stack of papers like she was preparing for surgery. Melanie Ross didn't look at me. She knew better. She was paid to be efficient, not empathetic. Judge Dorsey shuffled into the courtroom precisely at 9 a.m., her black robes trailing slightly behind her like a shadow. Her expression, unreadable. I respected that. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "This is the matter of guardianship for Thomas Wren," she began, peering over her glasses. "No spouse, no medical proxy. One biological child. Miss Ellis Wren, present?" I stood briefly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Miss Wren," she said, her tone clipped, "do you intend to refuse legal guardianship?" "I didn't intend to be in this courtroom," I replied. A cough from Melanie was her polite way of asking me to shut up. Judge Dorsey raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. "Noted. But the law requires notification and an opportunity to object. You've been served appropriately. Now we need a decision." The Silver Creek nursing home representative, some kind-faced woman named Janet, stepped forward and offered her own paperwork. "We've done what we could, but he needs a signature for continued care. Without it, he becomes an unclaimed case." Melanie spoke next, sliding a folder toward the bench. "We're requesting limited guardianship only. No financial burden, no estate management. Simply legal acknowledgement for consent." "I was 5 years old when he left," I said quietly. "He's had 25 years to remember I existed." The judge leaned back. "Do you want him to die anonymously?" Her words sliced through the courtroom like a cold wind. For a moment, the only sound was the shuffle of papers and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I swallowed, then turned to Melanie. "What happens if I agree?" She didn't sugarcoat it. "You control access. You can prevent any estate transfers. No contact is required. But someone has to sign for his body if he dies tomorrow." I clenched my jaw. The last thing I wanted was him slipping away as a public burden, his file tossed into a county archive. That wasn't closure. That was erasure. "Fine," I said. "I'll do it." The judge nodded, scribbling her signature across the form. "Miss Ellis Wren will be appointed guardian ad litem for the purposes of emergency medical and legal decisions." Order entered. Melanie's voice was cool and factual. "We request an addendum. Miss Wren specifies no personal contact, no financial transfers, no access to her property." The judge raised an eyebrow again. "Granted, with limitations." My name was now legally tied to his again, but not by choice. I stood, ready to leave. As the room began to clear, Melanie caught my arm. "Ellis," she said, leaning close. "Rachel Wren called me this morning." The air in my lungs froze. "She wants to see you." Rachel stood there, older, thinner, but her eyes still trembled the same way they did when she watched them drive away without me. I'd almost turned back when I saw her through the cafe window, standing alone near the back table, hands clenched around a ceramic cup like it might slip away if she blinked. The morning sun shimmered off Lake Michigan just outside, but inside, everything felt pale and muted. She looked up when I stepped in. For a second, her lips parted like she might say my name, but nothing came. I walked over slowly, slid into the seat across from her, and didn't speak. "I didn't think you'd come," she said finally. "Neither did I." I folded my arms. "You called my lawyer. Why?" Rachel blinked rapidly, like she was trying to hold back a flood. "Because I heard about the guardianship and I needed to see you before he dies. I'm not planning a bedside reunion. I'm not asking you to." Silence stretched between us. She looked at me like I was a photo she'd kept too long in a wallet, worn, familiar, but painful to study. Her hands trembled as she lifted her coffee. "You were 5," she said. "You had this red hoodie with the zipper broken. You kept asking if we were going to see the fireworks. Remember?" "No," I replied. "I remember a bridge. And rain." Her eyes filled instantly. "I begged my mom to let me take you. I wanted to drag you into the car. But Lillian, she said you weren't her responsibility. She wasn't wrong. She was cruel." I sat back, watching her. There was a kind of rawness in her face I didn't trust. Jordan's voice echoed in my head like a cracked warning bell. "Don't trust anyone." "I brought something," Rachel said, reaching into her purse. She laid a small velvet pouch on the table. "He left this on you that night." I didn't reach for it. "He said, if anything ever happened, this would prove you mattered to him." I almost laughed. "Did it say, 'Dear garbage collector, this one's mine'?" Rachel flinched. "You have every right to hate him. I do too. But Ellis, he's rewriting the will. He's leaving it all to you." I raised an eyebrow. "So that's why you're here?" "No," she said quickly. "God, no. I don't want anything from him. I haven't for years. But I needed to tell you. I needed to say, I'm sorry. I saw you cry when they drove off. I still hear it." I stared at her, trying to match the girl from that night to the woman in front of me. Something in her posture, a bentness, a weight, felt familiar. Guilt has a way of warping a spine over time. "I don't want his money," I said. "He should keep that will to warm his feet in the nursing home." Rachel pressed the pouch toward me. "Just open it." Reluctantly, I took it. Inside was a small hand-woven scarf, faded blue with edges curled from age. I unfolded it slowly. Near the corner, almost hidden in the threads, was faint embroidery. "To my daughter. E.W." The air left my lungs. I stared at those letters, my own initials. Rachel spoke again, barely audible. "There's more. I found the old tape. The social worker's tape from that night. I've kept it all these years." I looked up. Every muscle in my body braced for impact. But Rachel didn't say anything else. She just whispered, "You were never forgotten," and left the cafe. "Do you want to know what your father signed the day he left you?" Melanie didn't look up when she said it. Her voice was dry, lawyer flat. The manila folder sat between us like a piece of rot sealed in paper. The yellow light of her office made everything feel older than it was, like this moment had been waiting in amber. Jordan sat to my right, legs crossed, pen in hand as if she were at a board meeting, but she wasn't scribbling notes. Her eyes flicked between me and the folder like she couldn't decide which one of us would unravel first. Melanie finally opened it. "This was declassified 2 days ago," she said. "Illinois Department of Child Welfare. Unconditional transfer of custody. May 14, 1999. The document was a single page, signature block at the bottom. Thomas Wren. "I don't need to see it," I said. Melanie pushed the paper forward anyway. "You came here. That says otherwise." I glanced at it. Just a glance. The font was bureaucratic, dense. But one line caught my eye. "No further claim or obligation to the minor child Ellis Marie Wren." That was my full name. Written like a clerical error, like an item returned without a receipt. I didn't cry. I didn't clench my fists. I just stared at the paper like it was a faded receipt from a grocery run I couldn't remember. Melanie reached into the folder again. "There's more." She pulled out an old cassette tape, already loaded into a digital adapter. The speaker on her desk buzzed slightly as she pressed play. A woman's voice, professional but soft. "This is the intake interview with Thomas Wren, June 2003. Then, his voice. Gravelly, detached, like someone filling out a DMV form. I don't need it, it's just a mistake. I thought I wanted it. I was wrong. Silence followed. Jordan's hand touched mine. Not in comfort, more in disbelief. She didn't say a word, but when I looked down, I realized my hands were shaking. It was the first time I'd seen them do that since I was 15, holding my own medical records for the first time. Melanie turned off the player. "That's it," she said, leaning back. "No assets, no guardianship history, no contact attempts. You can walk away, Ellis." I reached for the document and tore it straight down the middle. Then again, and again. The sound was paper, but it felt like skin, old skin I hadn't shed. By the time I was done, the pieces lay scattered across her oak desk like confetti at the world's worst party. "Register the revocation," I said. "Cancel every estate, every legal trace that connects me to him. I don't want his legacy. I don't want his name." Melanie blinked. "It'll take a day to file." "Good." But she didn't move. Her eyes shifted back to the folder. "There's one more thing," she said carefully. "Silver Creek has denied extended care. They say he's being transferred." "To where?" She hesitated. "That's the thing. We don't know who made the request." Rachel took me back to Ashwood Bridge. I hadn't stood there in 25 years. The sky hung low and colorless as we stepped past the temporary chain-link fence. A laminated sign warned, "Construction zone, demolition, begins May 31st. The bridge sagged beneath rust and silence, its steel ribs corroded, the asphalt cracked and veined with weeds. It looked smaller than I remembered, and colder. Rachel walked ahead, each footstep deliberate, like she knew exactly where to take me. She didn't speak, not until we reached the midpoint. Then she stopped, placing her hand on the railing. "Every year on your birthday," she said, her voice nearly lost to the wind, "I came here. I left a letter under that stone." She pointed to a jagged chunk of concrete near the edge, where the sidewalk curved slightly. I knew that spot. I'd sat there for hours, shivering, not crying, just listening, hoping tires would roll back up the road. They never did. I clenched the scarf she'd given me days earlier. The embroidery scratched faintly against my palm. "To my daughter, E.W." I still didn't know what I felt when I read that. Anger? Pity? Some twisted, uninvited form of longing? Rachel knelt and lifted the stone. Underneath was a new envelope, sealed, marked 2024. She placed it gently beneath the slab, like laying a flower at a grave. "You don't have to read it," she said, glancing up. "I know you won't." "I won't," I replied. "But you did this? Every year?" She nodded. It struck me as both obsessive and touching. A ritual for a sin that was never fully hers to bear. I turned away, pacing toward the spot where the old steel pipe jutted from the guardrail, bent, rusted, but still intact. It was the only piece of the bridge that hadn't been replaced or corroded completely. My fingers brushed it lightly, cold, pitted, familiar. Without a word, I pulled the scarf from my coat pocket, folded it once, then slid it into the hollow pipe. No ceremony, no pause. Just done. Rachel said nothing as I stepped away, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The breeze whistled between the beams like a ghost breathing. I didn't look back. We left the bridge in silence. The fence clanked shut behind us. That night, I couldn't sleep. The dream came suddenly, quiet at first, like static. Then a voice. Not one I recognized by sound, but by weight. By its audacity to reach me even now. "Ellis." I waited. I wasn't looking for more pain, but pain found me in a manila envelope. The wind slipped under the office door like it had unfinished business. It caught the edges of the files on the desk and fluttered them just enough to remind me I shouldn't be there. After hours. Lights low. floor silent. Melanie didn't say much when she handed me the envelope. Just, we finally pulled it from the archives. The folder was thicker than I expected. Slightly warped with age, the corners softened, the flap sealed with a faint grease stain like it had passed through too many hands. It shouldn't have existed, at least not now. But there it was. I pulled it open. Inside, a cassette tape, handwritten notes, and 4 printed photos, scanned pages from the 2003 Department of Child Welfare interview. I laid them out carefully. The text was smudged, the handwriting angry and tight. Someone had written non-compliant in red ink in the margins. I picked up the cassette, already loaded into the adapter, and clicked play. The recording hissed. A woman's voice, professional, tired, began the session log. Thomas Wren. Follow-up intake, October 3, 2003. Subject is asked about relinquished custodial rights in 1999. Then his voice. Rough. Slurred, maybe from exhaustion. Or liquor. That girl should never have been born. Static. She wasn't part of the plan. I told them I was done. I meant it. Silence again. I signed the papers because I had to, because I couldn't look at her. The tape clicked off, but it echoed louder in my skull than any courtroom gavel. I didn't speak. I didn't move for a full minute. The air in the room went heavy, like grief took a seat beside me. Melanie stood near the bookshelf. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked, "Do you want to keep the file?" I looked at her. "Number I need it." I took out my phone, snapped a photo of the main transcript, then pulled a clean envelope from my bag. Slid in a copy. Scribbled one line across the front. In case he wakes up, remind him why I didn't come. I addressed it to Silver Creek. Used my assistant's courier account. No signature. When it was done, I sat back and breathed in the stale air of truth. Melanie walked me out without a word. The building groaned behind us as the night swallowed everything. Back at my apartment, I tried to sleep. It was nearly 2 in the morning when the phone buzzed. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I answered with a sharp breath. She spoke softly. "He's awake." And he asked me, "You sent him the tape?" Rachel's voice trembled, not from anger, but fear. The lobby of Silver Creek at 2 a.m. was lit like an interrogation room, cold fluorescence, sterile air, and the steady mechanical rhythm of someone's breathing machine echoing through the hall. I didn't sit. Rachel stood near the front desk, arms crossed, her coat still damp from the night air. An elderly nurse sat behind the counter, pretending to read a magazine, but her eyes kept drifting toward us, listening. Everyone always listens when people don't want to be heard. "I had to," I said. Rachel shook her head, slow and sharp, like trying to shake off water and memories all at once. "He's panicking," she whispered. "He's crying. Because he's scared. Ellis, he didn't even recognize me at first. He kept calling for..." "Who?" I cut in. "Not me." She hesitated. Then, "No." He kept saying, "Not the bridge, not the girl," over and over. A strange stillness pressed into my chest. I didn't let it reach my face. "Good," I said. For the first time, he's feeling my place. Rachel's shoulders slumped. Not with surrender, but confusion. Conflict. She'd always been the buffer. Between Thomas and consequence. Between me and remembering. I could see now how frayed she was, stretched between 2 ghosts who never gave her room to be alive. "He's afraid of losing." Her voice cracked. "Himself. His mind. He keeps repeating names. Some I've never heard. Some I wish I hadn't." I moved past her. My heels clicked against the tile, slow and deliberate. The corridor smelled like antiseptic and warmed over oatmeal. I didn't go to his room. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked into the small break room just behind the nurse's station, opened my coat, took out the envelope. Inside was a printed photo of Ashwood Bridge, taken just 3 days ago. Demolition tape still fresh, sky overcast, shadows long. On the back of the photo, I'd written 6 words in black marker. Where you left me, E. I handed it to the nurse, who blinked behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her hand hovered over the envelope like she didn't want to touch it. Leave it on his nightstand, I said. No questions. She nodded once. Rachel caught up to me at the exit. Why are you doing this? She asked, voice almost breaking. You say you don't care, but this means you still feel something. I looked at her, then past her. I came back, I said. Not for closure, for clarity. I stepped into the cold and didn't turn around. The next evening, Jordan called. He hasn't eaten or spoken since he read that note, she said quietly. The nurse said, he just stares at the wall. Most people read contracts. I read between the clauses. The notary office was too polished. Light oak panels, gleaming marble floors, and a potted fern that had probably never seen sunlight. The air smelled like ink and order, but the moment I stepped in, I could feel the tremor underneath. Some men rewrite their history in memoirs. Thomas tried to do it in legalese. Melanie was already there, sitting at a round table with a folder open in front of her. The notary, a thin man with glasses perched like a question mark, looked up as I approached. A woman from Silver Creek stood near the back wall, arms folded, unreadable. His will, Melanie said without pleasantries. Filed 2 weeks ago. He had assistance. From whom? I asked. She gave a soft shake of her head. Doesn't matter. It's still pending and legally reversible. I pulled the document toward me. My name was there, typed in bold under sole beneficiary. Every account, every itemized holding, every sad piece of real estate still clinging to his legacy. But one clause near the end snagged my eye. An ongoing monthly care allowance for Rachel Wren, not to be suspended regardless of the beneficiary's decision. I pushed the paper across the table. Convenient charity. Melanie leaned in, flipping to the addendum. Here, she said, tapping the margin, revocation clause. Section G. If the primary beneficiary refuses to sign acknowledgement, the entire document, including any dependent clauses, is void. I nodded. Perfect. She looked up. You're sure? I picked up the pen. I didn't hesitate. The scratch of ink on paper felt final. Not because I was giving something up, but because I was cutting the last illusion clean. Now file it, I said. Melanie stood. Once this is entered into the system, all his assets freeze immediately under state law. Let him sit in the emptiness he made, I said. Let him feel the weight. The notary didn't speak. The woman from Silver Creek murmured something about hospital logistics and quietly stepped out. The documents went into a folder, then into Melanie's briefcase. It was done. 2 hours later, as I walked out of the elevator into my apartment, Jordan handed me a piece of mail. Rachel's name on the envelope. Inside, a scanned notice from the Cook County Probate Office. Dear Ms. Rachel Wren, your designated support has been voided under Beneficiary Declination Clause. For appeals, contact within 30 days. I didn't need to imagine her face. The law had spoken for me. Now she had to decide who she really was. The woman who visited a bridge every year, or the one still holding on to his name. They say you can't die from heartbreak. But something in his eyes told me. He was trying. The ICU smelled like alcohol wipes and plastic tubing. Monitors blinked without urgency, only rhythm. The kind of place where time stretches and sound condenses into beeps and low murmurs. I hadn't meant to come. Rachel had called again, but this time it wasn't for Thomas. It's me, she had said. If he dies, I die too. Now here we were. Her face was a crumpled napkin, creased with exhaustion, wet in the corners. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She just pointed through the glass panel at the man in the bed. Machines breathed for him now. Tubes in his arms. Silence in his mouth. 25 years. I took one step inside, then another. His skin looked thinner than paper. His eyes were barely open, but they weren't closed either. I couldn't tell if he saw me. I didn't care. I sat. Slowly. Took the folded picture from my coat pocket. Unfolded it carefully. The mailbox under Ashwood Bridge, partially buried in gravel, rust climbing its spine. The one where Rachel had said she sent me letters I never got. The one I left untouched, because I already knew how silence answered. I placed the photo on the table near his bed, not close enough for him to reach, close enough for him to know. Rachel watched from the door, her hand over her mouth. She didn't speak. Neither did I. The air between us was heavy with grief neither of us owned fully. "You think I'm here to forgive him?" I said finally. Rachel blinked. "I'm here to remind him what he lost," I continued. "Not because he deserves it, but because I do." The attending physician entered, a man with tired eyes and clipped words. His blood pressure's dropping. He hasn't taken fluids in 48 hours. We're reaching the limit. Limit of what? I asked, turning slightly. Time, he said. And consciousness. Rachel's knees buckled slightly. She grabbed the doorframe. "He never wanted redemption," I muttered. "He wanted release." She looked at me then, full and raw. "You're wrong. He wanted to know you remembered him." I stood. My coat brushed the edge of his bed. "I remember the bridge," I said. "I remember the cold. The quiet." I walked out, the same way I walked away from that bridge all those years ago. Behind me, Rachel called. Not to me, but into the air. "If he dies, you'll never know the truth." I turned back once. "I know," I said. "The truth is, he lost me." I returned to the bridge, not to remember, but to bury. Ashwood Bridge was cordoned off with yellow tape and rusted fencing, the kind that warned you not with urgency, but with resignation. Rain painted the metal beams a darker gray, slick and skeletal under the dim construction floodlights. A night worker stood to the side, holding a thermos. He didn't ask questions. Maybe because he saw something in my face that said, "Let her be." I stepped over a loose chain and walked toward the edge, where the old railing still resisted time, barely. The wind pressed wet strands of hair against my cheek, but I didn't wipe them away. This was the place, where it ended before I ever knew it had begun. I knelt slowly, careful not to slip on the damp concrete. From inside my coat, I pulled out the scarf. The same one Rachel had returned to me. I'd wrapped it around the folded letter she once buried here, a faded photograph of Thomas taken in 1997, when he still smiled like the world owed him something, and a notarized copy of the guardianship release form. Everything he left behind. Everything I carried. The ground had softened with rain. I dug into the shallow mud where the foundation met the rail. My fingers scraped against gravel and rebar, but I didn't stop. I pushed the bundle into the earth and packed it down with the heel of my palm. I took out a tin plate, rusted and flat, a relic I had pried from the underside of the bridge years ago. With a black marker, I had written 2 words in slanted ink: "No return." I left it propped against the cement, not as a warning, as a declaration. I turned to leave, but the wind kicked up suddenly, catching the edge of my coat. From the inside pocket, something fluttered out, a photo I hadn't meant to bring. I reached for it, instinctively, then paused. It was me, a child, 5 years old, wet hair, wide eyes. I let it go. The image spun through the air like a broken wing before disappearing into the night. My phone buzzed just as I reached the far side of the bridge. Melanie. The court has just granted the order to destroy all assets related to Thomas Wren. Case closed. Case closed. Bridge gone. And for the first time, so was the wait. If he had lived long enough to face me in court, would he have lied again? The courtroom felt colder than any hospital room I'd ever walked into. No cameras, no reporters, just worn oak benches, the shuffle of papers, and the hollow echo of justice without spectacle. Melanie sat beside me, her tablet balanced on her lap. The judge, a graying man in a navy robe, skimmed through the docket with the mechanical detachment of someone who had seen too much and felt too little. "Ms. Wren," he said, glancing up, "as the only recognized biological child of the deceased, the estate, what remains of it, is yours to accept or relinquish. This includes photographs, letters, hospital records, any documentation retained by Silver Creek and the State Archive." I kept my voice even. "I do not wish to retain anything related to Thomas Wren." He nodded. "May I ask your intended course of action?" "I've submitted a formal request," I said, "to have all records transferred to Foster Youth United, anonymously, for case study purposes." There was a pause. Then, "That's unusual, but not without precedent." The judge's fingers tapped his gavel softly, considering. "Do you understand that by doing this, you forfeit any personal claim to legacy, material or narrative?" I met his eyes. "I've already paid enough." From behind me, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor cracked through the silence like lightning. I turned. Rachel was standing. She wore gray today. Neutral. Like someone trying not to take up space in a room where history was being buried. "I'd like to speak," she said. The judge hesitated, then nodded. "State your name for the record." "Rachel Wren, half-sister to the petitioner." Melanie stiffened beside me, but I didn't move. Rachel stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white. "I know what he did," she began. "I saw it. I was a child, but I watched our father walk away from Ellis and not look back. And for 25 years I've carried that silence like a shadow stitched into my ribs." She looked at me, not pleading, but present. "I didn't come here to reclaim anything. I never wanted revenge on him. I just wanted recognition. That what he did to her was real. That it mattered." The room held its breath. Even the judge leaned back, letting her words settle. I stood slowly. No rebuttal. No defense. "He never got a chance to do that," I said. My voice didn't shake, but I did. "I wasn't his daughter either," Rachel whispered. "Not by blood." The rain tapped against the old glass windows like fingers trying to remember a rhythm long forgotten. We sat in the corner booth of a coffee shop that still smelled like 1987, burnt espresso, lemon cleaner, and something faintly sweet that refused to die. "This was where my mom used to work," Rachel said, her hand tracing a ring-shaped stain on the table. "Before everything. Before him." I watched her. Not like someone who owed me answers, but like someone who had them finally and needed to let them go. "He met her here. She was 24, just out of a bad marriage. Pregnant." I raised an eyebrow. "Pregnant with you?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, but not with him." The words hung like fog between us. My mom thought he might be different. He was charming. Then, took her out, brought her roses, said he didn't care about the baby, that he just wanted her. "Let me guess," I murmured. "He lied." Rachel gave a soft, bitter laugh. "Of course he did. Turns out he was already married to your mother by then. He told my mom to disappear. Said he'd give her money under the table, just enough to keep quiet." She agreed. "Why?" "She thought she was protecting me." A silence stretched out between us, long and aching. When I was 5, she got sick. Real sick. Liver failure. No insurance. No help. She called him, begging for money. He showed up once, wrote a check, then asked if I'd live with him if things got worse. My throat tightened. She said yes. Rachel nodded. She was dying. She thought it would be better than foster care. He told her he'd give me a chance. But he never gave chances, I said, more to myself than to her. She looked away. He never let me call him Dad. Said it wasn't official. But I stayed. He bought me silence and meals, not love. Just another secret in his wallet. I leaned back. The coffee in front of me had gone cold. So we were both the leftovers? Rachel didn't flinch. But I choose not to let that define me. The owner, an old man in suspenders, walked past and paused, recognizing her. Your mother made the best peach pie, he said gently. She had your eyes. Rachel nodded, blinking fast. Thanks, Mr. Paulson. He smiled once, then disappeared behind the counter again. I studied her. Really studied her for the first time. The lines under her eyes, the way her jaw trembled when she wasn't speaking. We weren't blood. We were something stranger, tied by a man who had broken us both in different ways. So, what do you want now? I asked. Rachel looked up at me. Her voice didn't shake this time. A new beginning, she said. But I can't have it if you don't forgive me. I visited the house he left behind, not to reclaim it, but to condemn it. The front yard was a tangle of vines and weeds, curling around the porch rails like fingers gripping something long dead. The foreclosure sign leaned to one side, the red letters peeling. I hadn't seen this house in over 4 decades, yet I remembered every crack in the stone path, every shadow that once loomed larger than my body. Thomas Wren's old house, the place where I had spent my first 3 years before he erased me like a mistake on paper. The real estate agent, a thin man in an ill-fitting suit, waited by the mailbox. He offered me a strained smile. It's structurally intact. You'll have to sign off if you want it listed as is, or cleared. I want it cleared, I said. But not sold. He frowned. Then what should we? Donate everything. I cut him off. Furniture, appliances, even the books in the attic. I don't care if they're moldy. To whom? Foster futures. They help teens aging out of the system. The man hesitated, then jotted it down. And the house? I looked at the peeling white shutters, the brittle swing hanging limp on the front porch. Condemn it. It's not a home. It's a husk. He didn't argue. Inside, the air was stale and sharp, like closed-off grief. The walls were yellowed, and the hallway still creaked in that lopsided way. I moved room to room, untouched. The only thing I took was a single photo frame from the mantel. A family portrait with Thomas, a woman I barely remembered, and an empty space where a child could have been. I wasn't in it. I didn't need to be. By the time Rachel arrived, the crew had begun boxing things. She held something in her hand as she approached me outside the garage. I found this in his old briefcase, she said quietly. I think it belongs to you. She handed me a pen, silver-plated. I recognized the initials engraved on its side. TW. The one he used to sign me away. I muttered, my fingers closing around it. Rachel didn't reply. I pulled the original custody letter from my coat pocket, the copy Melanie had shown me weeks ago. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the corners. The ink still sharp, like it hadn't aged at all. I lit a match. Rachel watched in silence as I dropped the letter into a rusted fire pit behind the garage. The flames curled inward, slow and deliberate. I don't need proof he ever rejected me, I said. I'm alive. That's proof enough. The fire crackled, then went silent as the paper turned to ash. We stood there, the smoke rising between us like the last ghost we needed to bury. Rachel's phone rang. She stepped aside, answered. Her eyes widened as she listened, and then she turned to me slowly. "It's the police," she said. "They found something at the hospital, under his pillow." I didn't speak. She looked down at her phone again. "It's a handwritten will." He tried to rewrite his legacy in a letter no one saw, until now. The hospital room was empty. Not the kind of sterile, bustling emptiness that comes with machines being unplugged, but the quiet after. The kind of silence that stretches out like it's trying to convince you it never held life to begin with. Rachel waited by the door. The nurse, a soft-spoken woman in scrubs, handed me a clear plastic pouch labeled Personal Effects, Wren, Thomas. Inside, among a folded blanket and the scarf he never wore, was a single envelope. No stamp, no name on the front. Just the sharp edges of regret pressed into aged paper. The nurse cleared her throat gently. "He asked me to keep it close. Said someone would come who needed to read it." I nodded. Rachel said nothing. I opened it, slowly. The handwriting was erratic. Shaky loops and broken lines like someone trying to hold back time with every stroke. "Ellis, if I could go back to the bridge, I'd carry you this time." That was the first line. Not an apology. Not even an acknowledgement of what he did. Just a hypothetical rewrite of a scene that already shattered something permanent. "I thought I was protecting you from me, from a man I never wanted to become, but I only became worse after I left. They told me you were adopted, that you would have a better life. I told myself you'd forget. I told myself you'd survive better without the weight of me." Rachel was the echo of a decision I made too late. I couldn't fix what I broke. But I remembered. I always remembered. Rachel leaned closer, eyes darting over the words. Her hand trembled. "There's no legacy left. Just these bones, this bed, and a bridge that never stopped holding you. I hope someday you'll walk over it and not look back." There was no signature. Rachel blinked hard. He never loved anyone fully, did he?" I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. We left the hospital without another word. I carried the letter and the frame, the same photo I took from the house, the one without me in it. The rain came back as we reached the bridge. Demolition had been delayed again. The city always dragged its feet when it came to erasing ghosts. I walked to the edge where the old railing still clung to the cement like tired ribs, dug with my hands into the soft earth at the base, right beneath where the metal bent. I placed the letter there, the photo too. "I didn't come to forgive," I whispered. "I came to affirm. I exist." As I stood, wiping the mud from my palms, Rachel's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then she turned it toward me. Melanie's name. I answered. Her voice was low, urgent. "Ellis, someone wants to see you. His name is Michael Wren, your half-brother. Once I lived under a bridge. Today, I build them." The auditorium buzzed quietly. Polite murmurs, camera flashes muffled by the soft hush of anticipation. The banner above the stage read, "Foster Youth United, Wren Hall Inauguration." My name sat there like an echo of something long buried, now repurposed. I stood at the podium, fingers resting on the wood's edge. Outside the wide windows, the sun broke through Chicago's usual gray. There were no court orders here. No letters soaked in rain or regret. Just new bricks, new beds, new beginnings. I looked down at my prepared speech but didn't read it. "I didn't come to tell stories about my father," I said. My voice didn't tremble. "I came to remind, we don't need blood to call each other names." A pause. I used to believe I was alone, that what happened to me under Ashwood Bridge was mine to carry forever. But the truth is, when I looked closer, I found hundreds, thousands, who carried different versions of the same weight. I let that settle. That bridge is gone now. But this one we're standing on, was built for the ones who come after. Not to erase the past, but to give it a future. Applause followed. Soft, but real. In the front row, Melanie smiled. Not the corporate smile she wore in court, but something warmer. The kind she rarely used. Rachel didn't speak. She hadn't said much since that final letter, but when the ceremony ended, she walked up to the souvenir table and quietly placed a small frame next to the flower arrangement. It was the photo of me, 4 years old, wearing a crooked ribbon and a smile I no longer remembered making. I didn't stop her. Later, as the crowd thinned and donors posed for photos, I stepped out into the open courtyard. Construction tarps flapped gently in the breeze behind the new dormitory. Wren Hall stood complete, 24 beds, a communal kitchen, walls painted in bright, defiant colors, and beside it, still wrapped in safety tape and scaffolding, was something else. A narrow pedestrian bridge leading from the back exit to the library across the street. I walked toward it, blueprint in hand. The cement was still fresh, the handrail unpainted, but the sign had already been mounted, discreetly, at its entrance, for those who were once left behind. I stood there for a while, letting the words breathe. This wasn't a monument, it was a passage, a way forward, and I built it. I used to wonder what it would take to make peace with a past like mine. For years, I thought the answer had to come from him. From a face I never saw again, from a voice that once called me a mistake. But standing there, in front of the bridge that once defined my entire life, I realized peace doesn't arrive wrapped in apology. It's something you build yourself, one scar at a time, until the wound no longer owns you. I didn't choose to be left behind. No child ever does. But I did choose not to stay there. There was no poetry in how it ended. No deathbed confession that made anything right. What he wrote under his pillow, those shaky words of regret, weren't enough to undo the years I spent surviving in silence. And still, I kept the letter. Not because it changed how I saw him, but because it reminded me of how far I'd come. Some would say I should have forgiven him. Others would say I should have burned it all to the ground. What I did instead was build something he never could, a space for those who were left behind, just like me. Wren Hall isn't about Thomas Wren. It's about what grows in the aftermath of someone else's failure. It's about rebuilding, not erasing. Rachel stood beside me at the inauguration, not as his daughter, not even truly as my sister, but as someone who also knew what it meant to carry shame that was never hers. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We'd both been defined by a man who never knew how to love, but we were finished letting that be the end of our story. There's something powerful in the act of refusing to disappear. I didn't take his name to honor him. I used it to close the circle. The Ellis Wren Legacy Fund wasn't built from inheritance. It was built from refusal. My refusal to let abandonment become the only chapter of my life worth telling. Maybe that's what justice looks like in the real world. Not dramatic confrontations, not courtrooms echoing with verdicts, but simple acts of choosing a better story, even when no one else ever handed you the pen. And now, as I look at the sign above the new bridge, for those who were once left behind, I don't feel broken. I don't feel triumphant either. I just feel seen. Some stories are written in silence, in the moments no one witnesses, when someone who was discarded refuses to disappear quietly. Ellis Wren didn't chase revenge in the traditional sense. She dismantled the legacy of her oppressor not with rage, but with unshakable self-definition. When truth is given the space to breathe, it doesn't scream, it resonates. And sometimes, justice arrives not in the courtroom, but in the rebuilding of a life once torn down. Because no wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Thank you for staying until the end of Ellis Wren's story, A story that isn't just about legal papers or courtrooms, it's about silence, about the kind of silence so many carry without anyone ever seeing it. If you've ever felt left behind, by family, by a parent, by a name that was supposed to mean home, know this: your story doesn't have to end there. You don't have to wait for an apology to build something better. You don't have to inherit pain. You don't have to carry someone else's failure as your own. Ellis didn't walk back into that courtroom to prove a point. She walked back in to reclaim the space where her name had once been erased, not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. That's why Wren Hall was built. Not in memory of a man who walked away, but in honor of those who refused to disappear quietly. If this story resonated with you, if you saw a part of yourself in Ellis, in Rachel, or even in the silent places between their words, I want to thank you for being here, for watching, for listening, for holding space for a story that isn't wrapped up in neat forgiveness, but honest continuation. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you'd like to hear more stories like this. Stories about resilience, quiet strength, and the unexpected ways we reclaim our names. And if you know someone who's ever been left behind, share this video with them. You never know what sentence, what moment, might be the bridge they need. Most of all, remember this: you are not defined by the ones who left. You are defined by what you choose to build next. Thank you again for watching. And until next time, be kind to yourself, be clear with your story, and never forget: silence may be quiet, but it is never the end.